Nefertari was the royal of Egypt and the closest to the heart of her husband, King Ramesses II. And that's why he did for her something that never happened to any other queen before her. He built for her a temple, a whole temple, here in Abu Simbel, the one behind me. Actually, that temple was dismantled and relocated 65 meters higher than its original location by the UNESCO because it was about to submerge under the water of Lake Nasser during building the high dam to stand today in an amazing view by Lake Nasser. If the pages of the ancient Egyptian history are illuminated with the queens who had managed to rule the country alone, there were other queens who didn't take hold of authority, but by being wives of kings, they were able to play a prominent role, and some of them could clearly affect running things and directing the internal and external affairs of the country, jointly with their husbands. Generally checking out the queens of the Old and Middle Kingdoms, it's clear that none of them played a prominent role in the country's affairs. But in the New Kingdom, the most famous queens who stood out are Hotep, wife of Seqenenra, and Ahmose Nefertari, wife of King Amasis I, and Ti, wife of Amun-Hotep III, and Nefertiti, wife of Akhenaton, and they all belong to the 18th dynasty. They are followed directly in the 19th dynasty by Queen Nefertari, wife of King Ramesses II. Queen Nefertari, who is known in the Hittite books of history as Naptira, had occupied the most favorable part in the heart of her husband, King Ramesses II, the third king of the 19th dynasty. In spite of the lack of the historical documentations, we can learn more of her news through the monuments of her age, especially the small temple of Abu Simbel in Lower Nubia. It's the one that was cut out in the rocks in the heart of the mountain during her life and consecrated to her with goddess Hathor, but it was completely relieved after her death. Her statues were cut out on the facade of her temple in similar sizes to King Ramesses II, which proves the greatness of her rank. That's confirmed too in the phrasing of the name Nefertari, which means the most beautiful of them. And since the word Nefer means good, her name could also be translated to the best of them. Her sharing to King Ramesses II in rituals and formal celebrations was exceptional, and not known to have happened with any other queen except for Nefertiti, wife of Akhenaton. At a close distance to the great temple of Abu Simbel lies a small temple of Abu Simbel, separated from it by a narrow sandy valley. If the great temple didn't exist, the small temple would have been considered one of the wonders of the world. It has been transported in the 60s by the UNESCO to save it from drowning under the Nile water because of the construction of the high dam in Aswan. This temple was consecrated to goddess Hathor, goddess of Abshik. It's smaller than the great temple, for the width of its facade is 28 meters and its height is 12 meters. But in spite of that, it's a fantastic piece of art. On each side of the facade, there are 3 giant statues. 2 of them represent Ramesses II himself, and the one in the middle, catching the focus of attention, is of his wife Queen Nefertari. The height of each of these statues, with their crowns and feathers, is almost 11 meters. They are separated from each other by buttresses, bearing the grand royal cartouches of the king and the queen. These buttresses were cut out on purpose. They give the inspiration of the king stepping out of the mountain, facing south, the direction where the enemies of Egypt are supposed to come from. There he stands with his wife, in the most daring position, sending warning signals to whoever might think of invading their beloved country. Standing beside their legs are some of their sons and daughters. The queen had two princesses, and they stand beside her. They are Merit Amon and Henet Tawi. As for the giant statues of the king, princes stand beside them. They are Amon Horkhib Shah F and Baher Iyun MF and Meri Atom and Meri Ra. The memorial inscription on the basic rock by the left side of the gate reads as follows. The pharaoh has built this temple by cutting it in the hill as an immortal deed in the land of Takens, a work the like of which was never done before. Temples of Abu Simbel are considered the only and unique prototype of their kind in the art of human construction. This special area by the Nile was chosen for its sanctity, which dates back to the Old Kingdom. It owes its sacred position to its famous goddess of the Western Hills, Goddess Hathor of Abshik. No wonder why Queen Nefertari wanted her name to be associated with the goddess, and thus owned a temple consecrated for Hathor on her land. On one side of the wall, beside the door, King Ramses II stands in front of Hathor of Abshik, the goddess of the south, and the queen stands in front of Isis of the north. Behind the gate is the hypostyle hall with its 6 decorated pillars. The ceiling and the pillars and the walls are all one unit, hewn into the rocks of the mountain. Each pillar bears on its capital the Hathoric head, represented as a woman's face with the ears of the cow. Above her head is the shape of a house, which is her name, as her name means the house of Horus. The other sides of the pillars bear reliefs of the king and the queen with different gods and goddesses. On the right side of the entrance, the king captures a Libyan enemy in front of god Ra or Akhti, and on the left side, he is ready to smite an African enemy in front of god Amon Ra, to whom the grand temple was dedicated. On the northern wall, the king stands in front of god Betah and god Horib Shah F and the god of Heracnopolis, while Nefertari stands in front of Hathor. Ramses presents oblation of sacred water to god Ra or Akhti. On the southern wall, Ramses stands in front of Hathor of Abshik, while the queen performs her rituals in front of goddess Anukit between god Set and Horus. Then the king prays in front of Amun Ra. The great temple of Abu Simbel was dedicated to god Amun Ra, and in particular to Ra or Akhti, although it was built on the sacred land of goddess Hathor of Abshik. So it was inevitable to consecrate a special temple for her and commemorate her name with Queen Nefertari. A whole wall inside the temple was dedicated to the presentation of the queen. That's right and left to the entrance, where she stands on one side in front of Mut and on the other in front of Hathor. There are 3 gates that lead to aisles. The cartouches of the queen appears above the gates. In a settlement of not giving her a major part alone in the temple, King Ramses II appears on both the northern and southern walls, worshipping the sacred bark with Hathor. He also appears in front of Ra or Akhti and Horus, god of Mi'am and god of Baki, and Horus, god of Behini. sanctuary was badly damaged, but it still keeps its main elements of being a niche carved in the back wall of the temple, holding a carving of the full face of goddess Hathor above musical instruments. Below her head is King Ramesses II, enjoying her protection. Queen Nefertari got deified here in her temple, just like her husband Ramesses II did in his great temple. Here, she's receiving the crown from the goddess to be considered a deity during her life. Thus, she's equated to goddess Hathor of Abshik and is presented on the walls in her divine nature. Hathor appears here in a rare scene, which pictures her as a cow sailing on a papyrus boat and coming out of the Egyptian marshes. The temple was completely colored and completed, except for wooden doors closing on two unfinished small chambers. Consecrating a whole temple to Nefertari proves beyond doubt the high level she's acquired in the heart of her beloved husband. Whose name is associated with the greatest achievements in the ancient Egyptian history, has constructed here in Abu Simbel a miracle by all means. This is the biggest cut-out rock temple in the whole world, and the most wonderful one too. It was built to impress the southern enemies of Egypt, but the result was that it impressed the whole world, and it continues to amaze the people who come to visit it every day, every single day, especially during the alignment of the sun in 2 days each year, the 22nd of February and 22nd of October. It amazes us till today. Abu Simbel lies 280 kilometers south to Aswan city. It comprises the biggest rock-cut temple in the whole world. It's a great Abu Simbel temple, which was consecrated to God Amun, God Betah, God Rahur Akhti by King Ramesses II, who was represented here for the first time in the history of the pharaohs in his divine nature. The temple is distinguished by its engineering ingeniosity. When the sun rays penetrates the temple during sunrise and reach the deepest part of the temple, which is a sanctuary, then the rays shine on the 4 faces of the statues sitting in there, one after another. This happens 2 times a year, on the 22nd of October and 22nd of February, which are supposed to be the 2 most important dates in the life of King Ramesses, his birthday and his coronation day. The other engineering miracle in the temple happened in modern history, when the UNESCO called for the rescuing of the Nubian temples built behind the high dam. This temple and the smaller temple beside it that belongs to Ramesses' wife, Queen Nefertari, were both cut out and dismantled into thousands of blocks. After choosing a new higher location, the 2 temples were rebuilt carefully on the same angles, so that the sun can keep shedding its rays on the sanctuary 2 times a year at sunrise. This event expresses a strong relation between Amun the sun god and King Ramesses II during his life and after his death. Enough to say that both their names were immortalized and mentioned together, thanks to the great man-made miracle of Abu Simbel temples and the everlasting geniosity of Egyptians who lived and created before any mankind. The sanctuary is the most important and sacred chamber in any temple in Egypt. Since the temple itself is considered the house of God on earth, then there must be a private chamber dedicated just for him and considered the focal point of the building. It's the Holy of the Holies, or the sanctuary. Abu Simbel Temple enjoys a sanctuary that was unique in its contents. In fact, they are the contents of that sanctuary which share the most in the famosity of Abu Simbel Temple. In the middle of the room, there is the remaining of the altar that was cut out in the rocks of the mountain, just like the rest of the temple. The altar was made for the rest of the sacred bark. Behind it are 4 big statues of 3 seated gods and the king. The gods are God Amon, God Rahur Akhti, God Betah, and King Ramses II himself in his divine entity. The engineering miracle of Abu Simbel is in the degree of the construction of the temple, which faces the east, in a way that allows the rays of the rising sun to penetrate through the door and travels in the exact middle way of the temple, reaching the sanctuary, which lies on one axis with the door. But that's not all. The rays start shining on the faces of the gods one after one, from right to left, starting with Rahur Akhti and ending with Betah in the dark. It's quite observed that Ramses is seated right in the middle, beside Amon, the sun god, to whom the temple was consecrated. At sunrise, a splendid halo of dignity and solemnity circulates these statues and makes any spectator believe in its magical influence, which is calculated accurately according to the science of astronomy and engineering of the ancient Egyptians, and directed towards a certain angle to let the rays fall on the faces of these 4 statues in rare moments when the power of gods joins between nature and man in the most glorified and noble way.